Hey guys, what's up? So, yeah, it's been a while since I've done one of these. In fact, I've only done one other of these, and that was with Shifu Scott Rodell. Well, this time I'm with someone else who I've actually wanted to interview for quite some time. It's just taken a while for me to finally get around to asking him if he was willing to do so, and thankfully he graciously replied and stated that he was interested. So without further ado, I'm going to shut up and I'm going to actually allow him to, introduce himself and let us know who he is and what he does. So take it away.
Thank you. My name is Jeremy Thomas. I'm here at Joplin Pak Mei Athletic Association, which is my school that is a branch of Lam Hung Pak Mei, which I study under Sifu Rustin Acker and under Sigong Simon Loy Long Chun, who is out of Minnesota in Edina there. So Edina is kind of our headquarters. I was doing, prior to that, I made it to my brown belt in Daito Ryu Aikijutsu. I was very interested in Japanese arts, specifically sword arts, and the Daito Ryu just happened to be around, which is odd because it's a rare art anyway. So I got to do that and experience some Japanese swordsmanship, and of course I latched right onto that. So a time came when I could no longer, I had started a family, I could no longer afford those lessons because it was such a rare and expensive art. So I just so happened to be roommating with a gentleman who was a Kung Fu guy, and he introduced me to Sifu Lloyd. So Sifu Lloyd decides he's going to come to Joplin. We're super excited. I want to meet him. As soon as he gets out of his van, and forgive the vulgarity here, but he walks up to me, gives me a hug, goes back grabs his staff, and says, "Most people have sex this way, Pak Mei staff." So that was my introduction to Siga. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. Very, very much the opposite of my Japanese sensei. He's very warm, open, kind, reassuring. Very, very opposite of the militant, instructor, the disciplinarian. He's very much the opposite of that. Not to get me wrong. I mean, when he's serious, and we all listen up and fall in line. But
Yeah.
for the most part, we keep it lighthearted and we have a good time.
Okay.
The last time I've got to see Sigum was back in 2016 at the banquet we had, which I performed a saber form, our Pak Mei Gandao form for him, and that kind of became. Apparently, he was really happy with the performance because at that point I had only been studying for a few months. But having prior weapons, experience, I kind of fell into the staff and saber, which are traditionally the earliest weapons taught in Kung Fu schools. So I fell right into them pretty easily because I had studied, the bokken, the wooden Japanese sword, and the jo, the 4-foot short staff. So coming to the saber and the little bit longer pole in this Hakka Pak Mei art, it wasn't that big of a changeover as far as the tools I was working with. So I felt really comfortable with the Dao right away, and it's kind of become what my little branch is known for is our blade work. We picked up from another lineage their butterfly sword, Boy Dai Dao. Chasing those Twilla leaf sabers form. That's been really popular on my channel. I've been uploading little sections of that for people to see since it's such a rare thing, and those have been going over really well. People have been enjoying that. So my real mission here lately has been to, not just lately, but the last few years has been to preserve these weapons forms from specifically our Lam Hung lineage, because so many guys are just interested in fist forms. So many guys, and we also have a very well-known staff system. So staff and fist is really what brings people to Pak Mei.
Okay.
Guys that already have martial backgrounds, usually Kung Fu backgrounds, when they come to Pak Mei, they want to learn the fist forms and staff, and usually everything else just kind of goes by the wayside. And came in with kind of the exact reverse idea. I wanted to learn Pak Mei's take on bladed weaponry. And of course, I do the poles and the fists and all that too. It's just I put a little bit more emphasis on the bladed weaponry. And
I see.
Something I feel that is not enough people are working toward preserving. So I definitely want to be one of those people that is working towards preserving those weapons forms, so they don't get lost like so many systems have.
Okay, you actually touched on a lot of stuff that I wanted to ask you about, but we can go deeper into it. I do like that you touched on the fact that, you really want to preserve the weapons work, because a lot of Kung Fu schools or Guoshu schools, Wushu schools, however you want to term the martial arts, they focus so much on fists and then maybe one or two weapons, and usually not that deeply, while you seem to focus on preserving the weapon skills, period, which a lot of people don't realize back in the past, the weapons were the main things that people ultimately wanted to learn. The fists were just the basics of getting to the weapons. And we can dive into that in a bit, but I just wanted to go back a little bit.
I'm leaving at that point.
Huh?
Here's my perspective on that. Nobody fought wars barehanded.
Yeah.
So if you have a conscripted soldier, because you have a military conflict happening, they only have a certain amount of time to become proficient in whatever weapon it is that their position requires that they know.
Yes.
Okay? They don't have decades to develop and perfect these arts. Okay. When our Grand Master Chen Lai Chung was at Whampoa Military Academy during World War II, him and Lung Ying Grandmaster Lam Yu Guai, who worked very closely together, and they came up with a form called Army or Military Fist, which is a form that our lineage has, because Master Ing Yoi is where our lineage comes through, and he was working as a junior under Chen Lai Chung while he was at the academy. And the academy cadets had 2 weeks to train hand-to-hand combat, and then they had to go out there and do it. They trained the Big Saber Corps, the famous Big Saber Corps that got into the scrap with the Japanese boys and the katanas. They were learned under Grand Masters Chen Lai Chung and Lam Yu Guai at Whampoa Military Academy. So they definitely had a lot of influence on especially the World War II era soldiers. But that's the thing I think a lot of people do lose, is that soldiers didn't have that kind of time.
Yeah.
And that's why the trope of seeing the old master with the long scraggly white beard and that's why that's such a trope, because the guys that lived that long, they didn't continuously go into battle, and you go into so many wars, eventually you're going to have a bad day. Just like with a fighter. Fighter has a bad night, you lose a fight. Well, the same thing can happen in a war situation, except there's not going to be a referee to save you. So soldiering is definitely, as in ancient times, it was a young man's game.
Yeah.
And, if you moved up to officer level, then that's a different thing. But most people wanted to get their service in that they had to and be done with it.
Yeah. It's also interesting that you pointed out the whole trope of the ancient, Chinese master with the long white beard and the wise sayings and all that. But the funny thing is, we have tons of photo evidence of what Chinese martial artists and including instructors actually looked like. And they didn't look like that. They tended to be rather burly individuals, still black hair. And you could tell that they were probably at the most in their 40s or 30s when those pictures were taken. The ones who got to live a really long time with a long white beard and all that were either not part of the group that actually were using these skills to put food on the table, i.e. bodyguards, soldiers, escort services, hitmen. And when I mean escort services, I mean those who are transporting goods from one place to another. You look at those particular type of dudes, like for instance, Dong Hai Chuan, who's founded Baguazhang. He doesn't have the long white beard. He looks like a stocky dude in his 40s. Like, these are the things that a lot of people don't seem to get. And the ones who had honestly, I think we get the whole long white beard thing, the trope from it, me personally thinking, from Sun Lutang, the guy who, quite frankly, helped to modernize a lot of people's views on Chinese martial arts, particularly the internal ones, because a lot of our thoughts on Tai Chi Chuan, Xing Yi Chuan, and Baguazhang came from him, and he was one of the first to really popularize. I mean, he wasn't the first person to do it, but he kind of really helped to cement a lot of the terminology and a lot of the thoughts on the supposed benefits and esoteric ideas behind the internal arts and Chinese martial arts in general. But he was one of the illiteri. He was, he was one of the very rare examples of a martial artist who was also, part of the scholarly class and was able to speak in classic Chinese and read and write in classic Chinese. And people don't realize how rare that is. And what's even more rare is the hardcore mixing of the philosophical and esoteric aspects of Chinese martial arts. Because back then, those who were really doing martial arts to put food on the table, they were a lot more practical minded. And this is something that I keep bringing up.
I mean, we have to think back then, even like now, if you're injured and, it costs you work, it costs you time, it costs you money, which ultimately costs you food on the table.
Yeah.
Or any other luxuries you might need in life. So, both professional soldiers and people that taught professional soldiers, whether they were formally part of the military or not, it seems like usually they were not. Usually they were honestly, a lot like our military. They were more like subcontractors. We know you're good at this specific skill. Okay, we want you to come work at our facility, train these troops in this specific skill.
Yes.
Okay, this is what happened with Chun Lai Chun and Lam Wai. And they were known for what they did. They were known as good fighters. So they said, let's bring in these fighters and let them move. And it was efficient. So that's a model that I think has been set up for a little while. The trope of and idea of the warrior sage, the scholarly, upright thin man with the jian, hanging from his waist. I think that's another kind of trope too that's only semi-based in reality. Like you said, for so many centuries in China, there was only so many people in society that were even literate. So the idea of, every person that handles a sword also handles a pen, that can't be true.
Yeah.
So I imagine that these things like, pen and sword, are similar, pen and sword in one chord. I imagine they came later, towards the late 18 and early 1900s, when people, didn't have to rely so much on them for just basic survival. And we see the same thing in Japan. When there's a time of relative peace, that's when arts flourish. That's when we see things become more artful and more performance-like. And when they had that peaceful time through the late 1800s, early 1900s, in which there were some conflicts given, but it was mostly peaceful, and people could do things like go to the opera and see martial arts in that style, and they all these different places, the street performers, all these different places where you could see and get ideas about martial arts that might not necessarily be combative. And so from those points all the way through to the Run Shaw and the Shaw Brothers movie, I think, to some degree, it's done the arts a disservice. It's given people a lot of misleading ideas about what Chinese martial arts are. And, are they fun to watch? Of course. I would go back and watch, Five Deadly Venoms however many times. I wear the DVD out. Shaolin Mantis is another favorite. But, I think they put out a lot of ideas about Kung Fu that just aren't true, as far as the more esoteric abilities, running on walls, leaping from trees.
Yeah.
Was there the rare individual that can do that? Sure. There's the rare individual that, can do parkour and jump between 12-story buildings.
Yeah.
That's not the average person, though. These people are exceptional. And I think we got to keep that in mind when we look back at anything combative related. Is not everybody, that they're the outliers. They're not the rule. They're the exception. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind, that there's a certain level, especially with weapons, where you get proficient to a point where if you meet another person on the field that's at that same level of proficiency, you both kind of plateaued, and at that point it's going to be either a mutual kill situation or one outright kills the other. But they're both at that level that they couldn't really be practically trained any further. So at a certain point, you have to rely on the individual and what actually goes down during the fight itself.
Yeah, and they're also their own ingenuity in how they apply the techniques that they were taught.
Exactly. Ingenuity is a big part of it. I always like to tell my guys, don't just, when you go out to practice, don't just go out and practice, then play. Play is what is going to separate a good swordsman from a great.
That's a good point.
Going out and playing and finding out which parts of the sword can be used in ways that haven't been thought of yet, or have been thought of and been lost, or have thought of and not thought about in a long time.
Yeah.
Using half sorting types. There's all kinds of ways to use this weapon that we haven't, explored yet, because it's all been from Taolu. Everything we've been doing with Chinese weapons has all been from Taolu and forms.
True.
Which I was looking through some manuals with Scholar General Keith Seeley, a good friend and student of mine, and we came across a few things describing Taolu, 400 years ago, and it seems like Taolu back then meant something more akin to two-person exercise than it did to what we think of as a single-person form.
Yeah.
So it's my personal belief that the word Taolu has changed in meaning over the centuries.
I agree with that one. There has been, you can see something of an evolutionary change with Taolu, especially since in the beginning they were very simple, very drill-like. And then they would move on to the two-person forms, because the two-person forms was going to give you an idea of how to employ the weapon and, figure out the usage of the techniques that they were giving you, and then, how to properly apply them. But martial arts in China, I know we got to get back into your style, but I just wanted to point out, because I don't know if you've heard this, but a lot of what we're practicing now came a lot from street performances, and also from places where learning martial arts is one of the few extracurricular activities that a village may have. And sometimes a lot of fun would just simply be to just, you got the fire there, it's the evening, everybody's already had dinner, they had their tea, and they're like, hey, why don't you get up and show me that new Mantis form you're practicing? And it was fun just simply, it's almost like, seeing a dance-off, somebody's playing the music, and, your cousin gets up and dances, and the next person comes up and dances, except in this case, it was showing off the forms. And I'm thinking a lot of that has bled into the training that we see today.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's, when we see banquets and get-togethers, what do we got? We got lion dance going, we got drums and cymbals and gongs. It's a party. and it should be. And I don't think, I'm a lot more, what's the right word? Accepting of people's reasonings for getting into martial arts than I used to. I used to be 100%, this stuff is for combat, it's not for anything else. But after learning some Taolu and some forms and seeing some pretty neat things, I think there is some space for creativity and stuff that you might not necessarily use on the field. Because while you might not necessarily be using it on the field, you're still using certain muscle groups to do these movements. Okay, so you're getting strength training no matter what. Okay, my sensei had a saying that I've always kept with me. Martial arts may not make you smarter, but it will make you stronger. So that's another reason why I focus so heavy on weapons, is because it's strength training. I think weapons and fists need to be taught side by side from day one. That's my personal belief on that, and that's how I personally start my students, is usually with staff or saber, depending on their particular inclinations.
Makes sense. You've actually answered a lot of the questions that I was going to ask you, which is fantastic, but you've gone deeper into it.
I don't want any of this, I'm all about transparency. I don't want anything I'm doing to be a secret. That's why I put so much material out to show what I'm doing. You know, is it perfect? Of course not. I'm still learning. I'm a student. I always will be. But we're getting out there and we're doing it. You know, we're getting out there. We're testing each other. We're taking the hits. You know, so I feel like we're making progress, especially as far as making swordsmanship in general more appealing to the general public. You know, we've had so many people, you know, stop by, especially recently, you know, and say, hey, you know, this looks cool. What are you guys doing? Oh, wow, this looks like the set of a movie. You know, you guys are sword fight, you know, Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, we're close, but yeah, no, but it does. It's starting to really get a push and a recognition behind it. And it makes sense because the sword has always been an iconic weapon.
Yes.
It's almost more than a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost a symbol beyond a weapon.
Yeah, like
Everybody
a talisman.
knows what it is across every culture on the planet. Everybody knows that cross shape. It's just so iconic. Even though, you know, we know that spears are probably the superior weapon because of their length. We know bows because of their, you know, being projectile weapons were favored by the samurai long before katana were.
Yeah.
But when these did become popular, they became extremely iconic. And I think a lot of that is in the simplicity of it, the idea that one tool divides a whole thing into two halves. You know, I mean, that's like the purest description of destructive force I can imagine. A singular tool splitting one whole into two halves.
Good way to put it. I got a twofold question for you.
Okay.
To kind of go a little bit back into the beginning, what got you into this? And actually, well, it's a threefold question. One, what got you into this? What exactly is Pak Mei martial arts? And why did you decide to dive deeply into Pak Mei Kung Fu?
Okay. So, my dad's a golfer, and he bought me, when I was about 5, a set of golf clubs. And the first thing I did was pull out the driver and strike a pose something like this. And she was like, hon, I don't think he's going to be a golfer. So I was in Taekwondo at Atkinson Taekwondo in Joplin by 7 years old. I was with him for a couple of years. I got to green belt. And then, you know, I got kind of disinterested like kids do. You know, I went and played a little baseball, did wrestling, really liked wrestling. Did football, didn't like football as much. So when I found wrestling, I really latched onto wrestling. And man, I can't recommend it enough. Wrestling doesn't get enough credit as a martial art.
I agree.
So foundational to everything. You know, knowing positions, knowing how to move through positions, knowing how to transition. All that stuff is so important. Even if you're a striking fighter, that's something you need to know how to maneuver yourself on the ground, or you're just gonna be lost. We've seen it. We've seen strikers that have gone to the ground with no ground game. Well, an example I always like to use of that is, you know, Brock Lesnar's first fight with Frank Mir. Thought he was going to come in and rule with brute strength, and through his own arrogance, he stepped right into a knee bar and lost the fight. I mean, he stepped into it. He put his foot right there. It's like if it was a bear trap, it would have been like that. I mean, so that to me is kind of like hubris, you know. Does strength matter? Of course. You can never discount strength when we're talking about combat fighting. Can't discount it. But yes, technique is made to counter, you know, raw physical strength. So it's got to be a balance, I think, of the two. So I think that's another reason that weapons become so good, because so much of what we do with weapons is so precise. But we're still getting that strength conditioning because we're having to hold this heavy weapon. And this is why we should train with properly weighted weapons as well.
Yes.
And not things that are excessively light. I have some polypropylene, John, John, the only time I ever use them is if I'm sparring with, underage kids. That way, it's just a safety issue. It's a little bit safer for them. When it's adults, we're using hardwood. And we'll, of course, get gloves on, and we have our glasses and masks, and we do the smart thing and keep each other protected. But we like hardwood, and we like to keep things realistic. And one of the things that my teacher always imparted to me was the concept of don't get cut, don't get hit. So when you've got just a little bit of pain to reinforce that lesson, it makes it a whole lot easier to work out. I remember getting hit a couple of times coming home with my arms all striped up red. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I need to play the next round defensively. So that's how it is now. Is usually I'll start when we do start finally with some light sparring. I will start them out defending, meaning I will send them attacks, about half speed, and let them just practice defending and sweeping away. That way they don't become like the chess player that's overly aggressive and goes right in and gets checkmated immediately.
Yeah.
I have guys that have tried that. I've got a guy I work with, Josh, great guy, great friend, super aggressive though, and a really strong guy, ex-Marine.
Mm-hmm.
And he came in one time, really strong, rushing in on me, and I had a pole, and I just picked it up and put it between me and him and let him run himself on it.
Ow!
He ran on it, and that's the lesson. So
that one really hurts.
Overly aggressive, that's a fast, easy way to lose fast. I'm not saying that a quick offense can't be a good thing, but going in with your hakama half-tied, so to speak, that's not the best idea. So I try to get them. I think playing defensively makes them think a little bit more about strategy. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing I want them to do is to learn how to force reactions, how to look like I'm moving to cut the legs, so they go lower and then I go high. Mm. That level changing. That's kind of the secondary part of how I teach weapons. Mm. That way they can get used to leading the person, until then they break that rhythm and they're able to get the thrust or the hit in.
Mm. Is that part of the Pak Mei curriculum? Because I was also asking, what exactly is the Pak Mei system?
That's actually my personal way of teaching.
Okay.
So Pak Mei, let's talk about Pak Mei a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Pak Mei is the way it's usually pronounced.
Okay.
We use the P, Pak Mei. A Pak Mei is a Hakka art. The Hakka people were ethnic people that fled from the Han, and they went west.
Okay.
And they had, the word Hakka literally means guest families, because they had to rely on the charity and help of others as they were making these treks as the Han were forcing them out. So anyway, they had their own type of martial arts, and a lot of them bear some similarities. And Pak Mei specifically comes from Grandmaster Chun Lai Chung, who learned it from a Buddhist abbot named Juk Fat Wan, who learned it from the Taoist priest Pak Mei. Did a Taoist priest exist that had white hair and excellent martial arts skills? I'm sure he did. But from everything that I've read and everything I understand, it was a creation myth that Chun Lai Chung created to give his art legitimacy.
Of course, just like a lot of the others.
Everything we know about most contemporary Chinese martial arts is that a mythological backstory is not uncommon.
Yeah.
To add legitimacy to an art. We also know that Pak Mei is very influenced by Lung Ying, because he spent so much time learning from Lam Yu Guai's father and even his uncle. They're on their estate. So we are very similar to Lung Ying in the way we do things. I would say Lung Ying moves a little more in diagonals, whereas we move a little more straightforward down the middle. the essence of it is forward, forward, forward.
Mm.
So the essence of Pak Mei is offense, offense, offense. Our stance is pretty high. We call it a high horse stance.
Mm-hmm.
Our stepping is there's no sliding of the feet. It's all we pick them up to make sure that we can move on any terrain.
Mm.
And about, where they live near the rivers and stuff, and even fighting on boats. You've got a pretty solid foundation. So when you move, we always make sure that we take 2 specific individual steps instead of and then slide, because you might be on terrain that's not going to facilitate that. So Pak Mei is really an amalgamation of what Chun Lai Chun learned from his martial arts instructors. He has four teachers that he honors in the form, in the 8 trigrams form. But he certainly probably had more teachers than that. But those are the 4 he acknowledges are his Lee Gar teacher, Lee family style, the Lam Set, who taught him the Wanderer style, the Lung Ying dragon style, and I always forget the other one. Then the actual Pak Mei that he learned from Ju Fat Lon. So those are the 2 that are credited in that, or the 4 that are credited in that particular form. But he certainly had more teachers than that. So what it really is Grandmaster Chun Lai Chun was a man that was really good at martial arts, really enthusiastic about it.
Mm-hmm.
He had been learning since the age of 7. He had gathered a ton of weapon sets, and he created this mythological backstory and codified this art of Pak Mei so that he could have all his martial knowledge in one school under one unit that he could send out for people to participate in. And it did stay among dissidents, among people that weren't necessarily happy with the government at the time. And a lot of people that did Pak Mei were involved in secret societies. And our salute has a lot of mythologization around it, but it was a way for people of these secret groups to identify themselves to one another. So there wasn't any misunderstanding or any infighting. It was a way for them to safely reveal
who they
to
were,
one another who they were and what sect they were with. So yes, the rumors about Pak Mei being connected to underground societies and triads, there's very much truth to that. Chun Lai Chun himself worked in the security industry, and he became known for breaking arms. It was like almost a trademark of his. So naturally, the bosses and stuff in Hong Kong, the story of how he got to Hong Kong is pretty seedy in itself. Apparently, someone attacked him on the road, and he went a little overboard on the guy, and apparently finished him off. So he decided him and the family were going to pack up and move to Hong Kong.
I see.
So when he got to Hong Kong and established himself, he started working security for salt miners, and because it was such a lucrative business at the time, salt was so valuable and hard to obtain, they needed security for their caravans and stuff, and that was what Chun Lai Chun did as work for quite a while, and gained a reputation, and a lot of people came to him to learn the art, until he finally codified it, made himself a school, and started teaching. He taught 4 generations of students, and the last generation was the one with Master Ing Yoi, which is where our branch comes from. So that's pretty much how Pak Mei came to be, and the history of it. I think it was Chun Lai Chun's invention. I think it was his martial arts and his enthusiasm, and his little mythological creation story to add on to it. And I think it just worked. It all his stuff worked, and when stuff works, people pick it up. Um, when you see the results, if you're, especially if you're an employer, if somebody's trying to rob you and cut into your profits, and you've got a guy that people are looking at, and they're like, oh, this dude's they've got the arm breaker, it's just the word of mouth reputation is enough to protect your business. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
If you just have the intimidation factor enough, is going to make less people enthusiastic about trying to rob you.
True. Definitely true.
That's the real truth. Is criminals aren't looking for a match; they're looking for a victim.
Yeah.
So if you're out there and you're a man that carries himself and knows how to handle himself, most criminals that I've been around anyway, they know that.
Yeah.
They can feel that projection. They know, they can recognize a man. You know what they say, game recognized game. But it's true. They usually know when a guy can handle himself by the way he walks, by the way he stands, by the way he looks. If he meets their gaze, if he looks them in the eye. I mean, there's all kinds of ways, and tells and stuff. So, I think a lot of what martial arts does for people is gives them confidence, and I think that confidence is more valuable than maybe even the techniques themselves. Because that's the mentality of a criminal. They don't want a match; they want a victim. So if you look like a hard target, they're going to move on to something easier.
Yeah. And that tends to be the case with a lot of things, not just criminal activity, but even military activity. Many times they're looking for the soft targets to take out. They're not trying to go up against, the more powerful force. Like, oh man, the main head's over there, or the main artillery's over there. We're going to be going around. Like, warfare, period, has always followed that path.
Even Kung Fu had methods for probing for enemy weaknesses.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of stuff, ideas about siege warfare, leave the enemy and exit.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, one last big fight, and it's going to cost you a lot of men.
Quite a bit.
So let them go. Let them go out the back door. You've still taken the city. And so, I mean, it's stuff that seems so simple once we look at it, but if you were there in the heat of battle, you might not be thinking about it. But that's like, armies and militaries are structured the way they are.
True.
I think it's good for the individual to understand warfare on a larger scale as well as one-to-one scale. I think there's a lot to learn from studying larger scale warfare.
That is true. I find it interesting how you brought up the history of Pak Mei and how Chun Lai Chun had gathered different arts, including the art that he had learned from his Shaolin instructor, and basically developed the system to what it is. And I found an interesting parallel between that and what you said earlier about how you engage weapons and fist work, and how you've had a background in other martial arts and you're incorporating that into what you're doing now, which takes us right back into weapons, since I know that's one of your favorite things. So I wanted to go into, like, what is your favorite weapon and why is it the Dao?
Oh, it's definitely the Dao.
Yeah.
And it's because of the way it's built. It's a saber. It's a single edge curved blade. Okay, so in a lot of ways, it's like a katana or a wakizashi, depending on the type of Dao it is. I like the oxtail personally, and I know that they don't have the deep history as the willow leaf Dao and the goose wing, the Luye Dao. Those are more historically militaristic, but I don't know, the oxtails just seem so much more like Chinese to me. I don't know. I like the shape, and which the willow leaf are a pretty close second, but it's definitely my favorite weapon. It's very circular the way it moves, which is, circles are a big thing in Aiki arts, so that's something that already felt comfortable to me. And it was just, I found them to be really neat weapons, and then once I learned, that they were paired up, then I started looking at that, and then I'm like, oh, there's all these other kinds of paired weapons too. So now I've got to look at these. So then I started looking at the butterfly swords, and I went down to Florida to my Sibak Russ's dojo and learned that form at a seminar, and so I've been playing with that one hard. It's a really fun form. so yeah, I'm just continuing to keep collecting these forms and polishing and perfecting them and getting corrections where I need corrections from Sifu and Sigum, and making sure that I can preserve them in the best quality possible for the next generation.
Yeah, which is pretty much what instructors, that's their job these days, to try to preserve these arts. But that then goes into the rather sticky topic of where the arts are these days. Depending on who you talk to, I mean, there's some who feel like, oh, things are on the up and up. Things are pretty good. I mean, or there are some who are like, oh, wow, Chinese martial arts are so popular these days, so it's never been better. And then there are other people who, and I'll include myself, it's like the real skills are vanishing. Like, there's a lot more emphasis on the performance aspect, but the real skills are vanishing. So I just wanted to know your take on that, though I think I kind of know where it is.
I think it's a mix of both. I think, Chinese martial arts are becoming more popular, but they may be becoming more popular for some of the wrong reasons. If that makes sense. What I think we need more of is things like Sanda. We need more contact. We need more pressure testing. Okay, we need a chance to not just let people go out and show weapons forms, but we need a venue where we can give them something that's reasonably sword-like object that they can use to fence, and actually test their skill. I mean, how else do you?
True.
The other thing I'd like to see more is Chinese swords and cutting competitions. I'd like to see more people that enjoy cutting with Chinese swords, come together in groups, and that's something I'm going to try to start here in Rogers. Start an annual cutting, that'll involve Chinese arts and probably all other, sword arts. But that's really something I promote is cutting, because it was lost for so long, and I consider it the three stools of swordsmanship. Okay, you've got your solo play, your forms. You've got your sparring and two-person drills, and then you've got cutting. Okay, if you don't cut with your sword, it's like going to the gun range and never firing your gun. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's like you've got to know how your weapon's going to behave against different kinds of materials. It just makes sense to me. So I'm very much a promoter of cutting responsibly, of course. And there's the first book I got on it was Laoshi Rodell's book on tatami cutting and water bottle cutting.
Yeah, I got the exact same book. I remember when I did the interview, I showed it to him, and he was just like, "What?"
A lot of information to get people started cutting safely.
Yeah.
How to put stands in there, what kind of materials to use. It's a good little book that I still recommend.
Yeah, in fact, hold on.
Yeah.
Right here. Right here. This little thing is also what got me started. This little book right here. So
if you're wanting to move into cutting territory, highly recommend it.
Definitely. Highly recommend that. I guess you've already touched on it, but I was wondering also your thoughts on, with trying to preserve the skills, and you're talking about bringing Sanda back, and you're also talking about the cutting practice. But what are your thoughts on MMA's influence on Chinese martial arts these days? Because it seems to me that ever since those videos came out years ago where, the fake masters were getting beat up by, that one MMA practitioner, I've been noticing a lot of videos coming out of mainland China lately where you're seeing more guys showing off like hardcore training, everything from guys like breaking bricks, which I kind of see that as more performance art. But there's also guys like hard testing their stuff. They got on the gear. They're like pressure testing their stuff. You're seeing a lot more stuff. So I'm wondering what you think of the MMA influence on Chinese martial arts, and if it's been a positive, a negative, a mix.
I think it's just been a reality check. I think it's just been a realization that sometimes a punch in the face is just a punch in the face. Sometimes there's no mysticism there.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a practical way for dealing with a punch to the face, you're going to get punched in the face. And it was something that had to happen, I think. I think it was the wake-up call that had to happen. I've watched some sparring fighting things from back in the 50s in China, and they were just awful. I don't know what these guys were doing. They looked like two drunk kids, with these overhanded swings, and it was just I don't know what it was all about, but we definitely needed something like MMA, something where we can pressure test those skills and further develop. Iron sharpens iron. We can talk about pretty forms all day, and there's guys out there that have pretty forms, and they're always going to have prettier forms than me. I don't care about that. I care about actually being able to apply this stuff. Now, there's guys out there that'll say, well, if you just want to apply it, then just stay on the heavy bag all day. Well, okay, that would be an approach, but that's not my approach. Okay, I like to make it a little more varied than that.
Yeah.
So people, I have gotten a lot of kind of like backhanded compliments, I would say, for some of the ways I've tried to do things, without going through the proper, make them wait 7 years before they can touch a real sword,
Oh, that type of stuff, yeah.
No, I mean, no, it's not realistic. It's not even historical. You got conscripted, you get your weapon, you learn how to use it. I mean, there's no toys in between. So, of course, there's a reasonable expectation of safety there and due diligence. So we make sure that people are assessed for skill level and they're using the tools that are safe for them to use, the gear that's safe for them to have on, as much as possible. I mean, it's sword fighting. It's inherently dangerous, and everybody is told this. When they show up, it's not knitting. It's not dancing. It's killing each other. It's the art of killing. I mean, that's what it is.
It is, yeah. When we get right back down to it, that's
lighthearted and not get too much into the visceral kind of gross parts of it. I tend to do. When I do get to that point, if I have a really serious student that's interested in swordsmanship, I'll usually deal with them on that stuff on a one-to-one basis.
Okay.
Rather than in a group, because it's different people react to that stuff differently, and you don't want to scare people off talking about decapitation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's something I would say to other guys that are my age and younger that are starting groups is, it's okay to be enthusiastic about the intensity and the adrenaline and the blood flow and all that, but if you take it too far, it's just going to scare people off.
Yeah.
So that's just something I'd like for the younger guys to hear is just hold back a little bit on the gore, and then you'll have more people that want to participate. Guarantee it.
Well, we're coming to the end of this, but you've once again neatly segued into what I wanted to ask as far as where you teach at for anybody who might be interested in your area, who might want to learn more about the martial arts you practice and, actually get into the lineage. So
I've pretty much established myself here in Rogers, Arkansas. I have a dojo room available to me at Premier Martial Arts in Fayetteville. So anybody that wants to contact me via Facebook or phone call, text, anything like that, my information's out there all over the place, so you shouldn't have any trouble finding me. But anybody that wants to participate, we can get together privately at my home where I have all my stuff set up, or we can do it there at the dojo. I have come and go as I please rights there, and that's where I teach. Also, I teach hybrid jiu-jitsu on Wednesday and Monday nights. So sometimes it crosses over, and we get a little bit of jiu-jitsu lessons mixed in with our Pak Mei and vice versa. But that's not a bad thing. There's a lot more grappling in Pak Mei than might appear on the surface.
Well, I agree. There's a lot of close range fighting with that.
I think the two actually complement one another. So yeah, anybody that wants to come see what this is about, we can do it that way. Or I also do online classes via Zoom, FaceTime, any of those mediums. I do online classes. Usually they end up being around 45 minutes, between 30 and an hour, and those are $20 per lesson. Just one time scheduled thing, no contracts. Just one hour long lesson, $20.
Sounds pretty good.
Usually ends up being around 45 minutes. People get, you can't pile too much on top, or it all falls and gets lost. You know how that is.
Yeah.
You don't want to overload people with too much each session. But yeah, so that's the ways that people can get a hold of me, and I'm all about making this available to everyone. I don't think people need to be priced out of this. So if anybody out there wants to learn and they're having trouble, with monetary issues, we'll trade something. Can you cook a pie? Can you cook my car? We'll figure it out. Come train me.
Sounds fantastic. Well, I wanted to thank you, Laoshi Jeremy Thomas, for lending me your time. I mean, I know that you're very busy. I've been busy myself, but I'm glad we're able to make this work. And a lot of what we discussed is making me want to actually ask you if you're interested in any future discussions, because you brought up a lot of stuff that I would love to touch on for other videos. So,
always welcome. Always welcome. We'll set something up. Thank you for having me.
All right.
It was very, very enjoyable. Thank you for letting me talk here and have another platform to speak a little more candidly than I might normally do on my own channel.
That's perfectly fine. That's actually what I wanted to open this up for, like candid discussions on Chinese martial arts. So,
glad. Thank you so much. You've been a great host, and I hope that we can get together and do some more projects in the future.
Yep, same here. Take care, and everybody else watching, you guys take care. Catch you guys later.
Thank you so much.